Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the first ever Delta Emerald. I don't know if you want to call this a podcast, video thing. I don't know. What we're looking to do is to get leaders in the industry. And by the industry, I mean all cannabis, all cannabinoids. You want to talk about hemp, THC, the whole gamut. And so for our first guest, I'm happy to welcome Nosbisch. Aaron is the CEO of one of the most successful to date THC beverages on the market. I'll bring him on stage now. Hi, Aaron.
Oh, man. Hey, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Just for context for the audience, Aaron and I had the first opportunity to share a stage at BevNet earlier this summer. Unfortunately, that is behind a paywall, but it was a lit conversation between the two of us. I felt a lot of energy from the crowd and really wanted to get an opportunity for the two of us to chat things out a little bit more. There's a lot of questions that I think the industry has about what's going on in THC drinks. So I thought, what better as a first guest than you? So maybe to just get started, for those that don't know you, just give an intro on yourself and what you've built.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited. That call and that talk that we did at BevNet was probably one of my favorite ever. It's crazy that they paid well, that we need to get that information out, but glad we're doing so now.
Yeah.
So my name's Aaron Nosbisch. I am the founder and CEO of BRĒZ, BREZ, not BRĒZ, although a lot of people think that's how you say it, but BRĒZ. And BRÅZ has quickly grown to one of the largest, if not the largest, cannabis beverages in the space. We use a unique mixture of hemp-derived THC as well as lion's mane to create a undeniably euphoric and uplifting experience that is social but clear and fun. I also founded the company called Lucyd, which is the largest cannabis social advertising firm in the world. We run about 90% of social media ads for top cannabis brands, mostly in the hemp space, with that being the products that we can do mainstream distribution of through D2C and e-commerce. So that's kind of my background. And I've been serving the hemp space for maybe 6 years now, since 2018, 2019, and been in wellness and CPG and e-commerce for the last 15 years or so.
Fantastic. Thanks for the intro remarks. I think to kick things off, in my mind, if you're in this space, you kind of have some decisions to make. And if I can just kind of toss out from my perspective, let's say that you are of the view that THC beverages are the future. You're then talking about, okay, well, how big are they going to be? And in what form, how are they made available to the broader consumer audience? And so as a brand, you have to decide, well, which states do I focus on? And within that, you also have to decide, am I taking a direct-to-consumer strategy? Am I taking a retail path? What are the pitfalls or opportunities of both? So maybe with that preamble, Aaron, what is kind of your starter kit? And like, as you think about those options and decisions that you had to make, what kind of led you down the path that you guys are down at this point? If you can kind of give some of that context.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're most notorious in the industry for our direct-to-consumer penetration. That was kind of our road to market, is that we focused on direct-to-consumer, direct-to-consumer being e-commerce, shipping direct to the consumer, so they can buy online and receive at their door, for just to be clear. And, I think that the thing is that that's very a-traditional for beverage. It's not been seen a lot where beverage companies are making successful e-commerce site, primarily for the fact that the product is heavy and that the unit economics are usually low, which makes an e-commerce operation challenging. So zooming out a little bit, though, I would say that, where we really started is we took 200 of our cans, our initial prototype cans, and brought them to Benzinga, Miami, and passed them out directly. And I think that that's an important thing for any new beverage entrant to know, is that it's really important to get your cans in hands first. More important than your marketing strategy, more important than your distribution partners, or it's important to just get people trying your product. You need that real-time feedback to really understand what your product is, how it fits in people's lives, where you need to polish or round out the things that are keeping you away from product market fit. Because the thing is, until you have product market fit, you don't really have a path for scalability. And if you invest a lot of time and energy in whether it's retail and or D2C without really knowing that product market fit is there and setting it there, you're going to waste a lot of money, which none of us can afford to do while we're focused on building this category. So my strong suggestion would be, really focus on creating an exceptional product and get that into the hands of people first and foremost, no matter which path you're going to take. For us, we chose to use what we're really experienced at, which is direct to consumer. And my second piece of advice would be to focus on what you're good at. If you're great at retail, focus on retail. If you're great at e-commerce, focus on e-commerce. If you're great at going to events and getting your product distributed, then do that. Whatever that is, lean on your skill set to really amplify your brand initially. For us, that was direct to consumer. So we took a path of building a company that would be successful in direct to consumer. Something to consider if you're going to go down that path is there's certain unit economic thresholds necessary for making a direct to consumer business successful. So, a lot of people also know BRĒZ as kind of an expensive product in the market. We're more of the high end or the premier end of the market. A 6-pack of our 7.5 ounce costs $40, and a 6-pack of our 12 ounce costs $60. And that is both because we use a craft ingredients that do cost more than most do, but it's also because there's the unit economics necessary for direct to consumer success.
Right.
Those price points allow us to achieve an AOV, an average order value, somewhere in the range of $70 to $90, depending on the day or week. And when you're paying for customers through traditional advertising channels like Meta, or even if it's SEO or affiliate, you're kind of looking at what they call a CAC, a cost to acquire a customer. And that can be anywhere from $40 to $100, sometimes more, sometimes less. So you need to be thinking about what are the inputs necessary to a direct-to-consumer business to make it successful? And have you created a business model that will facilitate that success ongoing? And I think that's really one of the key things that makes BRĒZ work on a scalable sense to direct-to-consumers. We were mindful from the get-go of that structure needing to be in place for sustainability. And I think that's where a lot of brands go wrong in the hemp beverage space when they enter into D2C, is they don't really think through that.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. Well, and just to piggyback on one of the comments you said, cans and hands, I've learned more and more about how the alcohol industry thinks about things. They have a similar phrase, liquid to lips, basically the same thing. And I have heard directly from certain beer distributors that they're sold on the category. But one thing I hear quite often is that, say, a beer distributor, say the CEO of a beer distribution company, tried a bunch of products. And in this category, the liquid itself, I think, still has some room to run and improve if you just consider the full gamut of options that are available. And I think this is a really interesting point. You're taking a more premium approach, and there is a play there, especially when you're talking about flavor. And I think what we're seeing also on the other end of the spectrum is, say, a very simple formulation. Imagine just water and active ingredient in a can. That's another way to play it. Now, not throwing shade in any direction, my view is that if you're playing in the price game, all prices will probably go down over time. I'm not sure. What do you think about that? I mean, are there certain thresholds that you're playing for, or certain volume production thresholds that you're trying to hit? And what's your kind of view on cost per can on the production side over time?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, just to rephrase that, how does the pricing structure of hemp beverages evolve over time? This is, I think, the first point, and kind of what you hinted at the beginning, which is like, there's a lot of people who are just trying to rush into the space as quickly as possible. And they're working with low level formulation companies or co-packers who offer a small formulation arm, but it's really not their focus. And they create a pseudo seltzer with nano THC in it. And the thing that I think a lot of people don't realize about the THC that goes into these beverages is it's nano emulsified, meaning the particles are put and made very small so they absorb quickly. The thing is, when you make those particles small, you taste it more. And the thing about cannabinoids is they're bitter. They're very, very, very bitter. So the smaller you make them, the more concentrated you make them, the more bitter profile you add to the drink. And if you're having a traditional seltzer like a LaCroix, it already has kind of a tart flavor to it. So if you add a depth of bitterness on top of that, you get a really bad tasting drink. And so, to that point, I think that what we're going to see in this next phase of the category is a lot of innovation around formulation for flavor, for complexity, to create more of a cocktail-like experience that's, complex and exciting and desirable. But I also think that we're going to see, what we call internally as coactive ingredients. So we're going to see a lot of people adding additional ingredients to craft unique effect profiles and unique flavor profiles. So then, merging that over. So first off, that's very important. Like, you can sell anything once, but if you want to sell it more than once, it needs to be good. And really good, ideally. And that's also going to be the vehicle for propagation through word of mouth. No one's sharing something they don't like, but they do share often something that they love. It's almost innate to us as people to reciprocate that value to someone else. So focus on creating a great product. Like I can't underline that enough. I think that's where a lot of people lose a lot of money and waste a lot of time, is they don't focus on actually creating a great product and get feedback from a lot of people on what's wrong. When BRĒZ first came out, BRĒZ was way too bitter. I had some really insulting comments from people that tried the initial batches of BRĒZ because of how bitter it was. But that feedback allowed me to refine it quickly with my team and Travis and the rest to create something that was mainstreamly acceptable and had deep product market fit and turn it into a value. So where that goes with pricing, a lot of it came for us as craft ingredients and unit economics necessary to make it successful. And I think that there is a lot of idea that there's going to be pressure to push down the price of these drinks over time. And I think that that's true if we are all selling a commodity. But if we move from selling a commodity to selling unique and craft experiences and unique brands and unique value propositions, I think it might be the opposite. I think we might even see price go up in some regards. And what do I mean by that? It's like, if you're in the business of selling milk and you're a first mover in selling milk, and then a lot of people get into selling milk, the price of milk goes down. That makes sense. But if you're in a little bit more of an expansive mindset, if you're a little bit more in the idea of let's create some really craft unique flavors and some really craft unique experiences and a range of products in a brand that holds value outside of just the product that it sells, but the ideals that it provides as well, then I actually think there's room for it to increase. And where do you see this is alcohol. Like Louis the 13th is a $6,000 or whatever, or $15,000 bottle of whiskey. And, whether it's Grey Goose or, Macallan 12, we've seen for decades that even though everyone is selling ethanol in a different variety, they have figured out how to price it and accordingly for a full range. And I think that we have the opportunity to create far more innovation within the hemp industry than alcohol has. And,
even to piggyback, on the initial example of milk, one of the most recent and very successful brands in milk, and of all things, you think, is milk not done being innovated? But actually, I don't know if you've seen, I think it's Nestle Fairlife. It's done incredibly well. It's and part of that offering, it's a real solution for a different version of milk. Lower sugar content, very high protein content. And I think people are using it kind of as a like a smoothie or workout kind of like alternative. Just drink very high protein milk. And that product has done very well recently. And that's a milk, but that gives you, again, another example of where you can drive more premium pricing. One question on that: do you think that to the extent that there is more pressure to come, assuming that it does come, do you think that that's something that we see first or more prominently in retail trade as opposed to direct to consumer? How do you think that relationship plays?
Yeah, I think that pricing pressure increases when there's more options available at the same time. So in retail, if I walk into a Total Wine, for instance, and I see 15 or 10 different THC beverages from a range of $50 to $15, I think that there is going to be different demographics that are going to be attracted to different brands within that space. And I think that could increase the pricing pressure. I think that direct to consumer has a little bit more ability to demand a higher premium because it's more of a singular funnel, a singular flow and experience. But I would say though, at the end of the day, I'm not I think it's something that as a category we really do need to be mindful of, to not race to a bottom kind of game. Because the reality is we've already seen precedents in beverage, and not just alcohol. You see this in kombucha, you see this in functional beverages. There's already a precedence for premierization and quality, and it's not just charging more because we can charge more. It's making better products, and sometimes that is more expensive. And that's the thing, is I do think that it's an easy gut reaction to drop price in order to increase sales, but it doesn't always work like that. And ultimately it could be a detriment for not just the brand, but for the entire category. And so there's an opportunity to focus on value rather than price. And I think that, now let me counter my point though with something. Sustainable use, I think, is a very important piece of this conversation. Something I've noticed about BRĒZ is people buy our products. They might see it as a premiere and they're excited to try it and they're willing, and then they get it and they love the experience, that they say, wow, that was really worth it. Yet, when you're talking about a 6-pack that costs $40 to $60, how do you fit that into someone's life in a way that they can consume at a similar rate that they would consume beer or water or coconut water, whatever their beverage of choice is? And there needs to, something I think brands should consider, and something that we're thinking about often, is how do we create the conditions where we can be the premier in the market, yet still be available for more of a sustainable consumption pattern. And so for us, we're thinking about, other product lines that will allow for more value-based consumption, while also still holding the unique value and the premiumization of our brand.
This brings up a really good point on your $40 per case. And sorry everybody for getting up, but I had to get the notes that I had a call with the tobacco analyst actually yesterday, and I just want to share. So you're talking about 40, 60. I think you even mentioned like $80 average order value.
Yep.
To take a quick detour, in cannabis, what we see is kind of a bifurcated behavior pattern where you have one consumer, imagine them coming in on a weekly or higher basis to a dispensary. They're more spending $15, $20 at the door. And on the other end of the spectrum, you're saying north of $100 transactions, but you maybe only see them once a month. What's interesting to me about what you're describing is actually kind of a spending pattern that's kind of right in the middle to some extent. One thing I wanted to call out too, and this is just, to me, I thought just mind-boggling. So if we abstract this into another category like tobacco. Now, tobacco is addictive. Nicotine's obviously addictive, so there's some element of that to consider. But the average tobacco consumer in the U.S. consumes 5 packs a week, which is unbelievable in my mind, at an $8.50 average price. That gets you to $2,210 per year on the spend for cigarettes for those that buy. Now that equates to 5.5% of daily disposable income of the average U.S. consumer. If you compare that to the UK, that 5.5% actually looks more like 13% because cigarette prices are higher. So if you kind of go into the reverse and say, what are people willing to spend their wallet on? And if you really run that math, you're talking about $2,200 a year for cigarettes. The same is actually true in alcohol. The average alcohol consumer spends, I think it's about $1,945 a year on alcohol. Now, obviously, that average is deceiving. You've got some people that are spending way in excess of that, and some that are very much more occasional drinkers. But you're still coming to this kind of $2,000 a year spend on a category, not too dissimilar from what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think that this is a very important piece of the conversation that I don't hear a lot of people talking about. Is like how, here's how this is what I think about is if you're trying to disrupt an industry, you have to first meet the industry where it is at and then show it a new pattern from there. You can't just go in there and interrupt the pattern. That's too disruptive that it'll push you out and the market won't be receptive. But if you go and you match, so this is where the hemp THC, I think, has really found its groove. It's a consumption medium that's comparable to your seltzer or your beer. It's fast acting, comparable to alcohol. It's short lasting, also comparable to alcohol, and it's stackable. It's sessionable. You can use it with friends. And so all of these things are pattern matching, which is how you disrupt an industry. So I think the aspect that I think is missing here is like, we all need to consider how are people going to, if people are drinking at fairly consistent patterns, how are we going to create our products and our offerings that allow people to choose another beverage that could also compare to a similar level? So this is something that I'm putting a lot of thought on, especially as a premier end of the brand. And you do see it work in alcohol at scale, where you have premier products that people do use, but you start segmenting your market. And at this early stage of our category, you got to be careful of over segmenting your market too much, because you might reduce your ability to ultimately scale and thrive long term. So it's a great point. And and what's beautiful, and thank God, is unlike tobacco and alcohol, our products aren't addictive. Our products don't create habitual problematic behavior. They create space for people to see and be more. And that's not just a BRĒZ thing. That's a category thing that I'm very grateful to be in service of.
So I really want to spend the tail end of this conversation talking about D2C, because I think what y'all have cracked is very impressive, not just within the confines of hemp beverages or THC drinks, but just in any D2C period. So I'd love to get to some kind of benchmarking. If someone else wants to know what does good look like, I'd love to get into that. But before we go there, I do want to bring up something that I feel like most in the audience might not be aware of. And it's the dynamic between wine and wholesalers and the debate of direct to consumer. I'm not sure if you saw this. This is just as of, I think, the last couple of days. But this topic of, as a spirits distiller, can I send products across state lines? This is a very touchy subject. If you're a small craft distiller, and maybe we can share some of the links to some of these articles that have come out recently, but basically the odds are stacked against you. Let's say you have some kind of a distillery in Minnesota or in Texas. You're making some whiskey in Texas. You are limited by the market structure and by the regs, such that it's very difficult to move product outside of your own state. Yeah. And I think that there's a valid argument right now from those craft distillers that why are we being held back in this way, where, let's say, on the other end of the spectrum or the other part of the alcohol world, a brewer, a craft brewer, can sell product out of their own stores and distribute. So I guess this topic of self-distribution is very touchy in liquor, let's say. And so and I'd love you to kind of touch on that, because it has some really important implications for the future of D2C. And in my mind, where can we build allies from the THC drinks world? Who else are facing similar problems in terms of direct to consumer? And can we find a kind of shared common voice there? So I'd love for you to maybe add a little bit more on that, and then we'll get into some benchmarking.
Yeah, this is a really important conversation. So like a level of fine for this conversation as well is that a lot of the alcohol industry is built around what they call a 3-tier system, which is where you have the brand, you have a distributor, and you have a retailer. And a very old law, post-prohibition, was that you had to participate in that system in order to sell a product. And at the time, the reality is it was a different time, and it was a different world. And so I think that there's a lot of conversations in the hemp space of like, hey, do we need to follow a similar system? Do we need to participate? And I'm not really a proponent of it. My big idea here is that, and I really don't think it's that big of an idea. I think it's kind of an inherent human right, is that a free market is what really ultimately is going to facilitate the most success for all of us. And I think that there's an opportunity to learn from the past of what what did work and what didn't work, and what caused more problems, and how can we look at this hemp industry and this craft spirit industry and craft brewing industry as with a fresh perspective, where we can optimize for consumer safety, but free enterprise, for market success, and the world has changed. When those laws created, direct to consumer didn't exist. There was no internet.
Yeah.
There was no internet. There was no shipping means and infrastructure to distribute these products like we do today. And so I do think that my 2 cents on it is, I think if we want to really enable citizens to have the highest chance of success in the market, then we can't create arbitrary restrictions and barriers to entry. And I think that if we do that, it actually creates a lot of corruption and fraud that leads to a detriment for the category. And honestly, where you see this most obviously is cannabis. Cannabis has a lot of barriers to entry in the regulated marijuana industry. Florida is my home state, and that's when I can talk about more confidently. Is when Florida first rolled out, it was a subset of friends of the governor or colleagues of the governor who received licenses. And they had to have 100-year-old farm in order to get access. So when we're talking about social equity, when we're talking about equitable enterprises, when we're talking about helping people reach their dreams, the American dream, you can't create these false systems that really only prioritize the corporations and the politicians. You have to truly create a free market, and that's what I think is so beautiful about hemp. Is I heard someone ask recently, it's like, how do we create equitable market inside of hemp? And it's like, the thing is, it is the most equitable market. There is no restrictions. We request that you take a safe approach, that you do lab testing, that you're making sure you're working with that you're being a good actor and working with good actors, and that you help support the category growth over time. But the restriction isn't a $10 million license and a $10 million vertically integrated operation. The restriction is lab testing, and that costs a few thousand, not a few million. And I think that's. I think that there is things to learn, and there's things to implement that allow for success of the whole category long term. But I think restrictions on D2C, restrictions on distributions, and you have to work with this guy in order to sell your product here. I think all of these things are ultimately just going to restrict access to great products to consumers. It's going to remove ability to the therapeutic benefits, and it's going to cause corruption and greed in an industry who currently doesn't have that much of it. And I'd be grateful to continue that.
So I think we do have some good news on the D2C topic. I think just this week, the state of New York was the 9th state or district to pass direct-to-consumer legislation for small distillers. Now, I'm talking about alcohol. I'm talking about distillers of alcohol, but the fact pattern is there. And I'm just calling this out because I think this is really important for people to pay attention to. It is not impossible that through the mass consumer access and growth of THC beverages, it might actually help shake loose some of these rules in terms of direct to consumer to the benefit of alcohol, to the benefit of certain distilleries and things like that. So maybe to wrap up, I'd love to now put the hat on of if I wanted to be like BRĒZ and Lucyd, how can I think about benchmarking? Like, what does success look like in terms of repeat purchases? And by the way, I give you a ton of praise for starting and managing this company in a very public way. For those that don't know, Aaron has made it a habit to post stats on how things are going for their business on LinkedIn. Amazing willingness and openness there. So feel free, folks, to learn more about that on LinkedIn and on their website. But I'd love to take this opportunity to talk more about that. What did you think success looked like when you first got started in D2C? Where were you wrong, or what did you learn, and what do you think D2C success looks like now?
Yeah, great questions. So I'll say where I made the biggest mistake initially was that I underestimated the challenge that beverages. It is not an easy category. It is not the same thing as selling gummies. It is not the same thing as selling a wellness product through e-commerce. It's its own beast. It's expensive. It's heavy. There's a lot of operational challenges. There's a lot of.
Can I introduce interrupt there? Do you, when you also say challenges, is it also as simple as someone receives the product and one of the cans bust? Like, do you have that kind of thing happen, or did you back
Absolutely.
in the day? Yeah.
Yeah, we still do, unfortunately. The thing is these delivery drivers aren't the most friendly with your packaging, no matter how how secure you make it. They toss it, and these are CO2 filled or exactly. Like these are compressed, these beverages have some compression in them. They're easy to break if you throw them around. And so so it's something you got to be careful of. And so it's those things, and not in this applies to retail too. When you're freighting around pallets of beverages, they fall over sometimes if you don't secure them properly, and that can lead to a lot of loss. But I think one of the bigger things is the margin. The margin in beverages is not the same margin you're going to get other places. And if you try to play a direct to consumer game, now you have increased acquisition costs on top of that. Now you don't share that same split with the retailer, the distributor that you usually would, so that saves you a little bit of money, but it's still expensive. And I think that's the thing I would say to people is I would be a bit more capitalized than I was when I first got into it, because I didn't really understand what I was getting into. And thankfully I had a lot of friends like yourself and who helped show me the ropes quickly, so I could manage it and do so with an amazing team. But that would be the first thing. So as far as like success, I think a couple things. One is, if you're focusing on a direct consumer model, build a business model that supports it. You need a high AOV. That AOV needs to be in that $50 to $100 range minimum. The higher it is, the better.
And is that, can you speak maybe to the shipping? You're including shipping in that, and do people like to see free shipping even if you end up putting it in the cost of the product? Like, what's the buyer's mentality around that?
Absolutely. It's a great question. My suggestion is actually to not do free shipping, and we don't do that at BRĒZ. And I think the reason is, I would suggest it for other categories, but for beverage, there's an inherent understanding that this is a heavy product that requires a more significant shipping cost. And so we found that not including free shipping, but showing people that, hey, here's the price. It's an affordable shipping, but it is expensive to ship. So for our customers, they're paying somewhere like $40 to $60 for the 6-pack or more, and then they're paying $10 in shipping unless they want it faster. And I haven't found too much friction from that, actually. And I think it's because there's an understanding with consumers. Like I get that if I order a beverage online, it might be a little bit more. So if you can offer free shipping, do so, but don't make a business model that you're ultimately going to have to change because you can't be profitable enough with it. And be mindful that beverage is a challenging thing in the first place. So it's always easier to come down in price than it is to go up in price, so I would recommend start high and go down if you need, rather than start low and go up if you need later, and pay all your customers in the process. So now as acquisition, so AOV really $80 like minimum. Like if you can get to $80, you can make a successful business. If you can get to 120, you'll have a very successful business. So AOV is very critical. Second point is, like, CACs cost anywhere from CACs being cost to acquire a customer, no matter the channel, you're going to be paying somewhere between $40 and $150. On average for us, it's like 70, 72. So that's something you want to keep in mind, is like, that's what your average cost is going to be to acquire a customer. And frankly, that's kind of without your overhead. So that's not factoring your partners, your team, or your agencies that you're working with to do that. So it's an expensive game to play. It's possible. You just need to design the system first. And
where do you think your break-even point is in terms of number of orders from a customer to be money good on that? I know that the CAC is probably changing over time, and you're pushing on different channels, which I want to hear about too. But how do you kind of think about that relationship?
For us, thankfully, break even is first order. I have a big profit centric mindset where I try not to. Now, just to be clear, that's not the case for most people, and most people would even argue that you shouldn't do that. That you should be buying customers at a CAC to LTV ratio, is what they call it. So if CAC costs $1, that the LTV over, 12 weeks, 18 weeks, 6 months, 12 months, 24 months is 3x or whatever. So a lot of people build their companies that way. I, just with the consistently evolving landscape that is our category, I focused on more of a profit-centric approach. So that way I had the flexibility and optionality as we've scaled. So for us, I'm currently scaling at a break-even basis. Now, the thing about a break-even basis is that's not a profitable basis. That's a break-even basis. And when you start adding other costs on top of that with overhead and whatnot, that's actually a loss. It's a loss leader is what we call it, in the industry. So now, this being said, what's something beautiful about our category is that these products are very sticky. People really do enjoy them. And if you can really create a craft product, they can enjoy them even further and you can beat industry standards. But the industry standard is already a high LTV. Now, I think we have a higher LTV than most do. So please understand that the categories might be a little bit lower than what I'm sharing, but for us on a 6 months LTV basis, we're seeing something like 250% or 2.5 orders from their initial. So they're buying once, and then within 6 months they're buying 2.5 times from us, which that breaks most benchmarks within D2C. You often see something like 140, 160%. So an additional half order or an additional order at max on that 6 month basis, and then on a 12-month basis, we're seeing something like 300% to 325, 330%. So on 12-month basis, like between 3 and 3.5 orders on a 12-month basis. That's mind-blowing. Just to be clear, like direct-to-consumer businesses don't see that no matter the category. And so where you really only see that is alcohol. You see that in alcohol, and you see that in tobacco. You see that there's a few other categories, but it's very rare to see that type of LTV. So something I think about, and frankly, if I had Ian's money, what I would be doing is I would be probably scaling much more aggressively than we are, because there is like a fast payback window if you have that type of LTV. And if you build things into your e-commerce operation, this is another thing I would do right out of the gate, is launch with subscription. Like people they're first not that familiar with ordering beverages online. Like I personally don't order really any beverages online, and I'm sure it's similar for you, Ian. So it's like, so if you can create the conditions where it's easier for the consumer to receive your product without having to go through some operation every time, and if they like it, then they'll keep it. So for us, 35% of our revenue is subscription now, which is pretty significant. And as you can imagine, when you have that type of repeat purchase rate and subscription built into the business, you get exponential growth because it just starts to stack and stack and stack over time. So I would do that right out of the gate, and you're going to increase your LTV because of that cohort. So I think that's pretty important. So benchmarks, I would say, is you want to have an AOV around $80 if you can get there, more if you can. You want to be focusing on subscription right out of the gate. You want to be paying for CACs somewhere between 50 and 150, but it's unique to your business. Like it shouldn't be this is industry standard, thus I'm paying it. It should be, this is what works for our business, and that's why I'm paying it. And that CAC target, or for us, we look at what we call MER, media efficiency rate, which is total spend to total revenue. We know where we need to fit in that total spend to total revenue range to sustain our cash flow positive operations. So we're always looking at that to determine whether we increase spend or lower spend or optimize our creatives or optimize our website. We're always looking at that. And I think, one thing I would warn people on is there's this idea in the e-commerce direct to consumer world that you have to spend X amount of money, or you have to get X amount of data, or you have to do, you just have to play the game for a certain period of time before you can be successful. That's bullshit. Don't buy into it. There is truth to data sparks momentum. That is true. But when BRĒZ started, I was spending $100 a day until that was profitable. And then once that was profitable, then I scaled. I didn't spend $1,000 a day waiting for some magical fairy to come and wave a wand and all of a sudden I'm going to be successful. Don't buy into that. If it doesn't sound true, it might not be. So be very careful in that. There's the internet's a funny place, and there's a lot of people who will take your money to offer you services. So you just got to be mindful that this kind of goes to a broader business topic, I'd say, which is like they call it the CEO fallacy, where it's like I'm going to hire someone and they're going to fix all my problems
for me.
It doesn't work like that. That's called application. You need to focus on delegation. Know enough to understand whether or not you're achieving success, and if you don't know that, then don't hire for it.
Yeah. All right, last question from me. It's a big topic, so go in whatever direction you want. But as kind of the leader on the D2C front, I think the holy grail if you look at cannabis, has been to get access to all these customers that we know want cannabis. And I think one thing that's been really special about y'all is that you've learned how to play the game on platforms like TikTok. That's how I first heard about you guys. But I think it's expanded beyond then. So can you give us a lay of the land from your perspective on some of these platforms, and is it true that they're actually open for business if you know how to play it, or kind of maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, the thing about social advertising, it is the most impactful form of advertising in human history. And that is something that's really important for people to know. It's not the same as TV advertising. It's not the same as magazines. And, part of this is it changes with culture. So I got to be careful of presentism here, where TV is not as relevant to our world as it once was. So there have been very effective forms of advertising in the past. But the thing about digital advertising is we have more data. These platforms have more data than any company has ever had access to, in order to support showing relevant ads to people with a high affinity towards those products. And that's very important, because that helps you with the product market fit puzzle. You're showing your ads to people who actually care about them. Right. And so I would say that digital advertising is a very important medium for us as businessmen and women today. And that holds true with hemp. But because of hemp and cannabis's unique legal reality, there has been restrictions imposed by most platforms. Meta and Google are most notorious for restricting cannabis brands from advertising. Now, the hemp industry has kind of created a little bit of an opportunity here. You can actually compliantly advertise hemp products on both Google and on Meta. Now, they do make you jump through a lot of hoops and loops in order to do so. We were pioneers in 2019 in finding compliant paths to advertise. Back then, it looked like educational advertising. For an example, what is CBD? How does CBD work? What does it do for you? So we would educate consumers that would then click through to their website where they could purchase the product. Since then, Meta, for example, has evolved and Google has evolved their policy to facilitate hemp products. Now, something funny here, Ian, is that they don't actually facilitate the sale of THC and CBD, but they do facilitate the sale of hemp.
Right.
So you get this kind of like silly game you got to play, where you can advertise hemp products, or you can advertise products that include hemp, but you can't say that they have CBD and THC. So this is where Lucyd and kind of my operations have shifted from a little bit of a compliance first agency to what we call more of an activist agency today, where we know the rules and we support them, and we try to play kindly to the policies, but we also think they're a bit silly. And we look for opportunities to actually promote these products that are hemp products, which are CBD and THC products, in a way that's compliant. So I'd say it's a bit more of a gray spectrum these days on the digital advertising side. The main channels are Meta, Google, and TikTok, and all of them have unique policies that you have to kind of dance around. So I would suggest finding a partner, and not necessarily just us. There's a lot of people who can do great advertising. Lucyd's been doing it for a very long time and very good at it, but there's a lot of great people. But don't go blinded, because you'll spend a lot of time in this cat and mouse game, which can eat your dollars and your time very quickly. And if you're on a short runway, that can be very expensive and very, so I tell people it's direct to consumer looks really sexy and you should pursue it, but just do so smartly. So now on the flip side, I got to mention probably my new favorite platform, which is X, or formerly known as Twitter. My friend Alexa over there, she was one of the, and I think she's a mutual friend of ours. She was actually the writer of a new policy at X that does facilitate advertising for cannabis, THC, CBD, and hemp without restrictions, no ifs, ands, or buts. There's some states that have restricted access to these products, like Alaska, for example, or I believe Idaho as well. So you might have there might be some states that you can't advertise in. But as far as like mainstream advertising platform where you can say what you want to say and not have to worry about any issues, and you don't have to play any games, X is that platform. The trouble is X is not notorious for as much success as platforms like Meta are or Google is. Right. But this is where creativity, it really becomes the the variable that makes all the difference. And it's true across all platforms. If you can find creative means of communicating your value, your vision, your brand, your product, then you can find success that other people don't. And and what's beautiful about that, that's a barrier to entry of creativity, not dollars. That's a barrier of entry of uniqueness. And so for me, I think what you mentioned on TikTok, for me, a lot of my ads and our brand's ads are just like me doing things like this, like just recording funny, and I think that people are so tired of being sold things that whenever you just communicate very honestly and authentically about what you're trying to do and who you're trying to help and who you're trying to serve, it resonates with others, and find that unique aspect for you. You can look at BRĒZ, or you can look at Wonder, or you can look at these great brands as examples of what that looks like. But really, the goal is not to copy. The goal is to learn and then create new, because that's what the market actually wants. And that's where you're going to get outsized returns. I tell people all the time, I'm not really, when we like you said, we build in the public, I'm not too fearful of people copying us, because really it's their loss, because they're kind of in a game of always chasing us or following us. What really you should do if you want to create a category defining brand is get really unique and learn from the players in it, but then make your own path, because that's where you're going to actually push the bounds for all of us. And you're going to have a much higher chance of creating a disruptive brand that can compete with BRĒZ or can compete with Wonder, or can ideally that we can learn from, because it's now pushed into new dimensions that weren't possible before. And I hope that's what we all do, because I think that's what's going to lead to the most benefit for the consumers and then the brands in the process.
Yeah, it's an important point. I mean, this is a new category, and so we're all trying to show the consumer that pre-existing occasions, brand new occasions, this product is available, can be useful to you. And I think it's just kind of a pattern recognition, and also realizing that it's not like other things. It's its own category unto itself. And so there's a lot of opportunity there to help the consumer expand their mind literally with the product, but also consider what are the different opportunities that I have to, what am I putting in my body at what different times in my life. And the fact is, there's just way more opportunities to participate with something like THC than ethanol alcohol.
Absolutely.
Talking about people like to work out, whatever, like there's a lot there. So I want to wrap this up. I really, really appreciate you coming for this first one. Is there any message you feel like needs to get out there, or any questions that you have, or kind of suggestions you have for this even? Again, first time we're ever doing this, so I'm all ears.
Yeah, I mean, first, I'd just like to tag on a point to that last message, which is, I think, something that's super important for the cannabis and the hemp industry and the alcohol industry, as well as just mainstream consumers to understand, which is that all of the hemp-derived THC beverage, and this is true for some marijuana regulated beverages, they do not hit the same as a traditional cannabis product. Cannabis smoking leads to a very instant high that puts you very high and kind of drops you off. It also creates an odor, which I think some people it doesn't work in a social scenario. And also, unless you're with a bunch of, cannabis smokers. And on the flip side, edibles, they create, a 30 to 60 minute onset that lasts 4 to 6 hours. And, it's not something you would necessarily do at the bar. But what's happening with the beverage industry that's so unique is it's a new medium and effect profile of consumption. This nano emulsion feels different than smoking does, and it feels different than edible does, and it feels different at different milligram doses too. 20 milligram edible would put me on my butt and I'd be sleeping for a while. I could drink a 20 milligram THC drink and have some of the best conversations of my life with some great people, and so it's a different effect profile. And I say that because I think a lot of people see what we're doing and they think, oh, cannabis, that's an edible, that's going to put me on my mind, I couldn't use it that way. But as soon as you try one of these products, it becomes very clear to people that that's not what this is, that this is a far more comparable product to alcohol or that effect profile and that experience than it is to a traditional cannabis edible, but without that inebriation where you can't think straight, without that inebriation where you don't know where you're walking or you're going to fall over. You have a sense of clarity that comes with these nano emulsified products that I think is very important, because if people don't understand that, then we're going to create laws and conditions within the market that is more so based around regulated cannabis edibles than really around these nano emulsified diversified beverages, which are just not the same. And so,
Right.
you know, one of the things I think that all of us can do is help people try these products, because, you know, feeling is truly understanding. And when you have that level of understanding, we as a broader people group make better decisions for our society. And then we can get more effective laws that actually facilitate the therapeutic aspect of these products. And one last thing, Ian, is you made a really good point about this, and I think it ties into the sustainable aspect. It's not just pricing that we need to consider for sustainability of an alternative product like this. It's also about what does it look like when you are consuming this product versus alcohol. And you kind of touched on this. It's not the same. You know, it's similar, and they parallel each other, but it's different. You know, the thing is, like, if you would drink a lot with your buddies, you might be hanging out in a crowded bar and sticky grounds, and maybe you get sick from drinking a little too much. That doesn't happen with cannabis beverages. Instead, maybe that looks a little bit more like going to a bonfire and having really meaningful and great conversations that deepen connections with your friendships, your friends, and your family, and ultimately you maybe even create more love for the world. And so it's important that we as a category showcase what it looks like to consume these beverages and sessionable behavior, so we can show what it looks like, a snapshot per se of what it means, and how therapeutic and recreational consumption of this alternative category is really a net benefit for society.
It can be both. It can be both, and a growing recognition that the same person can have both needs from a medical standpoint and the social benefits of this too.
Exactly.
And depending on the context, you kind of dose and form factor choice accordingly. And that's I think that's what the panoply of options that are available to the consumer now are unlike anything we've ever seen before. And I think cannabis beverages, THC drinks, they are going to usher in this new era. So I'm really excited about that. And Aaron, I can't thank you enough for the leadership that you've shown. Let's keep after it. See you at CanadaCon in January next year, and let's keep going.
Heck yeah, man. Appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks so much.